Just start writing now. I'm going to cover a bit about CSS, kind of do a little exercise with you guys, and I'll show you some really cool stuff on my computer, probably after an 8-minute break. As I mentioned earlier, coding is not about memorization. It's about, once you know the fundamentals, if you have questions, I say the best thing to do is to Google it. I forget things all the time, but when I Google it, I get the answers instantly. So I'm just going to I'm going to demystify a bit about the CSS syntax you've been seeing. So this was on the Cold Steel. You saw here you have a selector. And there are did you guys get through most of section 5? Most of you? Okay, great. So there are a lot of selectors. I think there's over 40. I probably use 3, most of the time. If I need some other selector, I'll Google it. And remember that selectors, so you have, select. It's the way to get access to what you want to style. So, the basic one is the H1 tag, paragraph tags. You have pseudo selectors, which I'll get into a little later. Within here, we have property. So what we want to change, do we want to change the color? Do we want to change the font size, etc.? And then we have the value. And then we can have tons of these, so this could be pretty big. But I want to demystify some things because you will see this syntax over again in JavaScript quite often. So the first thing I want to show you is this opening and closing curly brace. This encoding, and you'll see this a lot in JavaScript, this is called a code block. And you can think of this synonymous to, written English as a small paragraph or a package of logic that's encapsulated. So this opening curly brace and closing curly brace, you will see that a lot with functions, objects, for loops, while loops when we hit JavaScript. This guy here is a code statement. Can you guys read my handwriting?
Yeah.
Okay. This semicolon here, this ends a code statement. You can think of that as like a period in English. So you'll see this a lot in JavaScript too. Other languages, they end their code statements in different ways. Some of them have nothing. And another thing you will see, I'll use a different color here. This colon here, and this property and value, this is called a key value pair. And you will see this again in JavaScript. So right now it might be a little bit of a mystery, but when we hit JavaScript objects, you'll see these same themes pop up. Good. Can I erase?
Henry, before you erase it, why is that a semicolon as opposed to a comma with every other object in JavaScript? Because it won't work with comma.
Well, yeah, it ends the code statement, so it's done. Well, in objects we use commas.
Right.
So yeah, that's a little different, but we'll get into that. Yeah.
Can you explain what you're doing with the selector function? You're referring back to that as some other point, but you obviously have multiple selector identifications. Are you calling these selectors different? Are you assigning them names, or?
We'll get into that soon. Yeah, you can have IDs, class selectors, pseudo selectors. So yeah, I'll get into that in 1 second. Alright, I'm going to erase this guy. No?
Well, to answer your question, I think I use commas when you want to build strings together.
Generally, this is kind of a weird thing, because generally with an object with key value pairs, it's a.
Well, with an object, yeah, you separate it by, so it's just a syntax difference.
Just
but I want to
wasted
point out the
many, many minutes, if not hours, code won't run because I used a comma instead of a semicolon.
Yeah.
You guys will do that as well, so. I thought Henry might have the magic answer.
Yeah, there's no, it's just how the code guys decided it should see. But semicolons, you'll see that a lot with variables in JavaScript. You'll write a variable, it'll end with a semicolon. So for a lot of people not new to programming, it's kind of like, think of it, it's not exactly a one-to-one, but it's kind of like a period in English. It ends a logical statement. But of course, there are quite a few exceptions. But generally, in other languages are different. So the question that I have is, in the videos, we have our HTML file, right? And we have our CSS file. And Colt said, you can put all of your CSS in here, and it's fine. Why do you think we would want two different files? One with just HTML and one with mostly CSS?
Henry, is it technically CSS if it's in HTML? Or is it?
No, so within HTML you'll do the script tag, right?
Yep.
And that's a way to, CSS code, closing script. So you can do that, but a lot of times we do have a separate CSS file.
I think it's just to keep your HTML clean, so that it's just
Yeah.
the text basically, or whatsoever's in there, and CSS is just for that.
Definitely, yeah. Do you have,
It's
Chris?
easier to read if someone else has to read your code,
Mm-hmm.
so the interface between people
Yeah.
are on the same piece of code is easier.
Yeah, exactly.
It's easier to see and easier to change.
Exactly, yeah. So if you have a bunch of CSS in here and HTML, and someone says, hey, I want this certain button this color, and you do a control find in Sublime, and then it pulls up some other HTML. When you get it, like with a small project, it's not a big deal, but when you get a big code base, it definitely makes a difference. And this idea, actually, let's say, just for this good, we have a JS file as well, which we'll be learning later. This is separate too. This idea, this theme, you'll see over and over again in computer programming, and it's called separation of concerns. Just to, or SOC. And you'll see, why do we use HTML as like the nouns, CSS is like the adjectives, JavaScript is like the verbs. And you'll see this theme over and over again when we talk about web architecture, separating out different components with different priorities, different objectives. All right, so let's, oh, this green guy doesn't want to go. Is this better?
Yeah.
Okay, never write with this guy. All right, let's, I'm just going to do this exercise just to kind of, think about HTML, CSS in a little bit of a different way, abstract way. Let's pretend that this entire office is a web page. And let's say, we have a table tag, we have chairs, computers, whiteboards. So let's talk about chairs. So let's say in this HTML file, let me write it red. We have this chair. Let's just put text, myself, closing chair tag. And we have a whole list of these. I'll just write this one for now. A whole list of chairs. And let's say over in CSS, like, I want to change my chair. So we'll use just the basic selector, chair. And let's say I want to make the color yellow. I want to make the height, so property, color, value, yellow. Let's make the height, let's make it a high chair, like 4 feet. That's pretty high. Let's say, since it's a chair, high chair, wheels, those are dangerous for high chairs, so we'll turn that to false. So I just want to do this to my chair here. Will this work? What will this do? There's a whole list of chairs.
Change all the chairs.
Exactly, yeah. We'll change every single chair in the room to an ugly high yellow chair. So what if I want to just change Henry's chair? What would I do? What kind of selector would I use? ID, exactly. So let's make room here. Let's just use my initials for the ID. And do you guys remember the syntax for an ID selector? Yeah.
What's the word that he uses?
Octavore?
Octavore?
I've never heard of that.
What the hell is that?
Yeah, I don't know what.
I think he made that up.
Yeah, probably made it up. Octavore or Thor? Thor. That sounds cool. It's provocative. All right, let's say that now we have a whole list of chairs. I want to make my chair, Adam's chair, Richard's chair, all a high chair. How would I do that? What's a good selector to use? But all the other chairs stay the same.
Are they in order?
Special.
Class?
Class chair, yeah. So the difference between class and ID is you can use class over and over again. You could theoretically, you have a list of chairs, you could each give them a different ID and then copy and paste this over and over again, but no, wrong. That's a hassle. So let's just call, I'm not gonna write the other chairs down, but let's just use class. Call it high. Can you read that? Probably not. Fish. What's the syntax for a class? Period. Now, let's take it a step further. So we pretend that this entire office is a web page. So like a web page, let me, oops, what is good here? This is a web page. And like a web page, we have different segments with different data. Let's say like a blueprint of a building, This part of the web page where we are right now, this is the lecture area. We have a conference room sort of over here. And then the kitchen area. And generally, we want to style chairs in the lecture area to be cohesive and similar. In the conference room, you'll see that's the kind of white conference room fancy chairs. In the kitchen are the silver high stools. What's the best way we can do this? Compartmentalize.
With divs.
Yes. So at the beginning of HTML, Cole kind of talked about divs a bit, and it's confusing to a lot of people. Divs definitely come into play when we get into CSS, because divs like if this is a web page and, you know, we have a header up here, and usually web pages, you know, we have different pieces and they want to have the same cohesiveness. Divs are used a lot. So let's say, yeah, we have div. And to style these, what would we use in the div? What kind of selector? Well, you kind of have two choices, but the most used, yeah, class. So, you know, we'll say class, lecture area, close div down here, and then we have a bunch of chairs within inside of here. Now, okay, that's good. Let's say in this lecture area, we want, you know, the chairs in the front to have a certain style, and the chairs in the back to have a certain style within lecture area. Oh, when might we do that?
No,
They're div. Where?
inside.
Inside, exactly. Yep. Nested divs inside.